Hello everyone and welcome to our podcast. We're going to be talking today about all things pupillage and life at St John's Chambers. By way of introduction, my name is Georgina Swinglehurst and I'm a member of the Private Children and Matrimonial Finance team.
And my name is Beatrice and I'm a member of the Personal Injury, Clinical Negligence and Inquests team. We are former co-pupils, colleagues and also close friends, and so we hope that this podcast will help provide you with more of an insight into life at St John's Chambers. Throughout the podcast we will be hearing from various members, our CEO, one of our supervisors, one of our silks and also a member of our clerking team.
So we hope this will be helpful and enjoy the podcast.
Welcome, Simon, to our podcast. As our CEO, it only felt right for you to be our first guest. I'm going to start with a difficult question. If I was to ask you to summarise St John's Chambers in one sentence, what would you say?
Okay, wow. I would say we are a down-to-earth, inclusive and supportive barristers' chambers based in the heart of Bristol, but operating much more widely.
It's a very good sentence, Simon. So I have another question for you. What do you think makes Chambers a positive work environment, but also a successful business?
I think it's probably a combination of three things. Good work, good support, but most importantly, good people.
This is a video that we are creating for aspiring barristers. Can you help us with what Chambers looks for in terms of prospective applicants?
Yes, what's interesting is, of course, barristers are going to be self-employed and as a result will have to run their own business as well as be a professional barrister. And so it's a combination of those skills. So it's not just the legal skills, but it's skills associated with finance and business, marketing and project management. And we take on pupils with a view to tenancy. So showing us that you will be ready to be a tenant and have those wider skills would really help.
That's really helpful. And Simon, if there was one piece of advice that you would give to a prospective applicant, what would that be?
The advice I normally give is to create what I call a storyboard, which is basically an Excel spreadsheet with all of the experience, the characteristics and the skills that you want to get across in your application and your interview, and put all of the stories that illustrate that underneath, from your work life, from any jobs you've had, from your studies and from life in general, and then revise to that when you come to interview so that you've got in mind the stories that will help you to provide your answers.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Simon.
You're welcome. Well done for doing it. Thanks.
Following on from our recent Pupillage webinar, some prospective applicants have submitted some questions which we'll be answering today.
What is the day in the life of a barrister like here?
So that's a hard question to answer, really, because I think something that we love about our job is no 2 days look the same. What the things that you could be doing on a usual day is you could be in court. So I'm in court anywhere between 2 and 4 times a week. Otherwise, you could have conferences with the client. And I know, for example, you do a lot of paperwork, so you'll have pure papers days. So I think a combination of that is how your week will look. I think what's really nice at the moment is in a post-COVID world, members of Chambers are in Chambers a lot more now. So if you're lucky enough to land on a day where you're doing papers when other people in Chambers are as well, you know, people try and make the effort to spend time together and, you know, perhaps go out for lunch if you can fit it in between your busy day. So I think really that's something we love, is that no 2 days look the same.
I agree, and actually one of our Chambers initiatives is at a set time on a Thursday we will all sit down together if we're in and catch up with our colleagues. I think that's really important. I mean, we're certainly in Chambers. If we're not in court, this is where we'll be.
How would you describe the ethos of Chambers?
My experience in pupillage is that everyone was extremely generous with their time, but not only that, we are a very collegiate set and very sociable too. There are a lot of opportunities to socialise not only with your peers but also local solicitors. For example, all of our teams hold annual conferences, which are a great opportunity to spend time with each other, but also, as I say, network with those who instruct us.
So we're now joined by Marcus Harding, who is the Family Practice Team Leader. Thank you so much for joining us today, Marcus.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. The clerk's room is often described as the hub of chambers. I suspect what our viewers will want to know is what's the atmosphere in the clerk's room like here?
Yeah, it's a very friendly, open and collaborative atmosphere. We have a very good working relationship. It's a bit of a almost like a sort of therapy room for everybody, for members and clerks alike. It's very open, which lends itself to lots of conversations, general chit-chat, and also it lends itself to a collaborative environment where we all kind of can solve a problem together. It's a forum for people to vent frustrations, concerns, or just catch up with people. It does feel like the sort of the nerve centre of chambers, so it is quite nice that it's a very welcoming area for people to come into, whether you're a member of the chambers or whether you're a staff member or whatnot. We hope it has that feeling because we want everyone to come in and hopefully we can solve a problem or just have a chat or have a laugh and feel a bit better coming out of it.
Well, I can speak for myself that I think I'm in and out of the clerk's room all the time as is Beatrice, so yes, that's definitely. Absolutely the atmosphere that you guys
and that's what we
created.
encourage. We like people coming in. You know, it really helps everybody for people to come in, and even if it's not necessarily just to chat about work, if it's just to have a chat and tell us what you did on the weekend or something like that, or even what you had for dinner.
I think it helps that in St John's as well, it's centrally located, so it's difficult to not walk through the class.
Yeah, we're lucky in that respect. You know, it is physically the centre of chambers, so people can come in, and you do have to walk through it to get from one end to the other. That's obviously a deliberate decision, but I think it's one that works really nicely, and it hopefully makes it feel less, particularly if you're a new starter or a pupil or whatever, less daunting.
Definitely.
Because it's always there and you just come in, and as I say, it's a very friendly place to be, and yeah, everyone regardless of who they'll be will help you, no doubt about that.
So obviously, Marcus, you and I work as a team. You are my first point of contact clerk. I was wondering, what do you think makes a clerk-barrister relationship work so well?
Probably communication. I think that's the key thing. Being able to know, from our point of view, to know what's going on with you, and you keeping us in the loop, and vice versa, us telling you what's going on, is probably one of the key aspects of it, because everyone knows where they stand. Yeah. But it also helps in a broader aspect, in a sense that, if you're practice development, for instance, we have an understanding as to where you want to be, people you like to work for, places you like to travel to, the kind of work that you want to do. Yeah. And like I said, the core thing I think is communication, because it's so crucial. I like to be in touch with members of my team every day if I can. Yeah. And I do encourage that. I like people to be in touch with me, because I know some people get worried about, we're swamping you with emails, or you don't want me phoning you up every day to
I phone you every day.
I like that. I welcome that. That's what we need, and we need people to do that, because I know people sometimes feel uncomfortable with that, but we love it. It's never a burden or an onerous task. It's always something we want to do, because
I am pleased to hear that.
We do want to do it. Never a burden. That is on record. Because we do need people to stay in touch with us, because we need to know what's going on as well, and it helps us manage your diary and your practice as best as we can, particularly if we know what's going on with you. Things like capacity, or we might say, I can't read your papers this evening because I've got a personal engagement of some sort, and we know that, and it streamlines the whole process, enables us to deliver a better service to clients, and hopefully enables everybody to have a better work-life balance, because you're not overloaded with work, and we know, or understand when you're at capacity and when you might not be at capacity, or if you need to be closer to the local area for one reason or another. Yeah. Again, it's probably a roundabout way of saying communication, I think, is the one, the sole thing or a key thing that helps everybody.
And you clerk members of all different seniorities, but for pupils who are first getting on their feet and are about to start their second six, how can the clerking team support them? Again,
it really feeds into my previous answer. I think we we do encourage people to communicate with us, and I understand that particularly as a pupil coming in, it can be very daunting. We like to encourage questions as much as possible, and we like to get an understanding from a pupil as to what although we do a specialised pupillage, what their key interests are, because we want to make sure that they're seeing work they want to be seeing and looking, following people at courts, doing the cases that they want to do, because for a starter, it's good for them to see more senior members of chambers how they act at court, how they approach difficult situations, how they interact with the solicitor and the clients, and that dynamic. But also, just in terms of just learning about the law as well. We want people here very much. Our key aim is to make sure that everyone has the freedom to develop practice they want to develop.
We had that conversation really early on, and you guys were brilliant at saying, okay, that's what I sort of had experience in, and that's what I want to do, and that was a really helpful conversation to have.
I think so. I think we want you to do what you want to do, and we, unlike some chambers, we have a specialised pupillage, so you obviously do your pupillage in whichever team that you apply for. But of course, within that, there are different practice areas. So speaking for my team and Georgie's team, if you're doing family, you might want to go down the financial remedy route. You might want to go down the children route. We want to stand there early doors because we can start laying the groundwork in terms of introducing you to the right people. Because you start a practice, the moment you start your pupillage, you start building a practice essentially. So we want to put you in touch with the right people so you can do that, and the right members of chambers. So we do that, and I think we listen as well. I think that's a key thing. It's not a case of you're doing this case because we need you to, and we're going to tell you to do this and this and this. We listen. We're not booking you in for things for the sake of it, and we want to sort of foster a general atmosphere of support and guidance from the clerking aspect, but also, of course, from the members as well. And just make it clear that there's never, if you're unsure about something, just ask somebody. So again, that's probably communication, I would say, is my answer to that other one. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's I'm going to keep driving that one because I think it's important.
Absolutely. And then lastly, I think you've spoken about this a bit already, but in terms of once you get taken on as a tenant, how our clerks and how you support career progression, is there anything else you'd say about that?
Only that. I think it's career progression and practice development is a everyday thing. I don't think you can sort of condense it down to a sort of annual or twice annual meeting, like a practice development meeting. We like to keep it as a live conversation that happens every day, and the reason for that is because, frankly, 12 months or 6 months between a practice development meeting is just too far away to be able to do anything meaningful. And also people's goals, aspirations, the direction they want their practice to go in potentially might change. And so in terms of general practice development, we really encourage people to just speak to us at any time, because the best way and the most efficient way to develop a strong practice is to for everyone to know what's going on and what your goals and aspirations are. We foster a general ongoing conversation because also, like I said, going back to one of us about pupillage, we can put you in touch with the right people that you want to be working with, and we also can make sure that you're being booked in for the correct cases that you want to be doing, rather than just filling a diary. That's not how we operate. We want to make sure that we want every case to be able to develop your practice in some way and point you in the direction that you want it to go in. So again, all I would say is that we really, really do foster a come and talk to us at any time, and we'll reach out to people as well. But it's an ongoing everyday thing.
Yeah. And you're having those conversations with people with all different aspirations, people who want to become a silk, people who perhaps want to become a judge, a real variety.
Yeah, I'm lucky in that I've got people of all seniorities in my team at all different stages of their career. At a base level, they're all just people with different goals and aspirations. So whatever that goal might be, if you want to go to the bench, if you want to be a silk, if you want to do more work for a particular solicitor, if you want to more work in a particular geographical area, if you want to be doing more work in a particular area of work, these are all things that we are alive to. But because of that, and because we work with a sort of vast selection of people in terms of seniority and experience, it enables us to have quite a large network of different solicitors that we can put you in touch with in terms of, I want to be doing more of financial remedy work, so we know who to direct you to. Equally, I want to do more care work, we know who to direct you to. That's kind of how we try to operate to make sure that people's practices are grown organically, but effectively, and in the right direction. That's our key focus.
It's as simple as I'll sort of say to you, "Oh, I really enjoyed that. That was really interesting. I love cases like that." Like a farming case or something. Yeah. You say, "Oh, great, good to know you enjoy that," and it's just having that communication, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, if you enjoy working with a particular solicitor or firm, that's a great bit of knowledge for us to know, because you do also foster those relationships with, if you're a junior, for instance, you might be. We talk about this a lot in the clerk room. You might be effectively growing up with someone at a solicitor's firm who's just taken on, just qualified. They were a paralegal, just qualified. They've gone into the same area as you, and you sort of work it out together almost, and you grow up together. Yeah. And some of the senior members have been working with the same solicitor for 20 years, and you've developed that relationship together. And again, that's a big aspect of it. So yeah, it's all really important.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Marcus.
How many mini pupilages do we need to do?
Georgie, getting your ducks in a row at application stage, this prospective applicant clearly wants to know about mini pupilages. How many did you do?
So I did about 2 or 3, and my view is that's plenty. I know people think that the more minis that they do, the better. I absolutely don't think that's the case. I think it's quality over quantity. I think there's a reality to fitting mini pupilages in when you could also be working, you're doing the bar course. So as long as you've done some good quality minis and you feel like you have got the experience and you've learned from that, in my view, that's plenty. You don't need to be going away and doing 20 minis. How many did you do, Beatrice?
I agree. I did 4, although interestingly, none of those 4 were at St John's Chambers, which I suppose answers a concern that some applicants may have, which is, do I need to have done a mini pupillage here? The answer is no. I don't think either of us did one here, actually.
No, I did do one in Bristol, which I think is helpful as I wanted to come to the West Country, and Chambers are interested in your commitment to the area. So I think doing one in the West Country, it doesn't have to be at the set you want to go to. That's beneficial, but I don't think it has to be at the set that you would, is your ideal dream set at all.
I agree. I think the takeaway really is what can you say you learnt on that mini that is maybe of relevance to your application here. It could be that Bristol is a place for me. It could equally be I saw the same area of law, or I saw a different area of law and that reconfirmed that that's not what I want to do, but rather now this is.
Yeah, I think that's exactly how I approached it. I mean, I think moving away from minis slightly and other things to put on your application, my view is there are lots of other things that you can do to give you that experience and to stand out. What other things were you putting on your application do you think is useful to have beyond just minis?
I think you need to have some kind of advocacy experience. That could be from doing a mock trial, or it could be from doing advocacy or debating experience. And other than that, it's really about transferable skills. The reality, and I think we both feel this in the job, is you are often meeting people at crisis point in their lives. There is very rarely a time we are at court with somebody who wants to be there. And so have you done any experiences which are exposing you to people? That could be customer service, it could be volunteering, things such as Citizens Advice Bureau, I was a volunteer there, but anything where you really get that exposure to people, I think is really beneficial. How about you?
I completely agree. I mean, personally, I worked for something called the Personal Support Unit. That was voluntary, and that's where I really learned that I was really interested in family. There was a lot of sort of private children applications that I would help people with when they couldn't afford to have legal representation. So I think that's definitely something that's worth doing. it's good for your application, but it's also just really good experience before you get into the job, which a lot of this is about. And I think the other thing that I really urge people to try and do if they can is go and marshal with judges. I was really lucky that I was able to go and marshal in the High Court with a family judge, and I thought that was just as, if not more useful than doing a mini pupillage. So I think there are lots of avenues to get experience, to have good things to put on your CV, and ultimately to be talking about in the interviews, which is what you want. You want to have things to talk about when you're asked questions. So I think any of those are important to go away and do, and it doesn't just have to be how many mini pupillages do you have.
And in any event, the reality of this job is you can often go and sit in a public gallery. You go down to the court buildings and ask what's going on and what you can sit in and listen to. If you're writing that on your application, well, we're going to be just as interested in that as a court experience where you've been led by someone or marshalled, as you say.
How does Chambers view second careers?
I think I can answer that question quite well, because I did come to the bar as a second career. I left university, I hadn't studied law, and I actually worked in sport, so not really related at all. But actually, in fact, I think it was extremely helpful, and the answer to the question is Chambers look at it really favourably. Ultimately, you've gone and got life experience doing something, you've learnt people skills, management skills, whatever it is that you've done in your job, and that's only going to benefit you going into this job. So I think that it's a positive rather than a hindrance if you've done something first and spent time doing that. So I don't think that's a bar to applying at all.
No, definitely not. And comparatively, we have applicants who've done both. I am somebody who applied on the bar course, and it's my first career. So we are really interested in applicants from a whole number of backgrounds.
What are your 3 top tips for completing the pupillage application form?
Turning to the written application and really our top tips, my headline tip would be read our pupillage policy. It's on our website, you can download it, and we in that policy outline the entire process, but perhaps more importantly, our marking criteria. My experience, certainly, of even applying at St John's is that policy was extremely transparent to the process. We aren't a Chambers that at interview has any hidden questions or really any hidden agenda. And if you are familiar with that policy, you are already on the same page as the people who are interviewing you. What about you? That's sort of my top one. How
That's a good top tip, and you're right, it's all in there. I think tip 2, everyone will have heard this, but do not make spelling and grammar mistakes in your application. Ultimately, the application is an exercise in your written advocacy, which is a large part of what we do in this job. So if the first time that you're presenting yourself to Chambers, the advocacy and the writing isn't good, that's not helping yourself to get further along in the process. So I think tip 2 is proofread and don't give us reasons to not progress your application further forward. It's an easy one to do, it just takes Definitely. A bit of time to put that time in, I think.
And finally, perhaps I would say, have a real think about your why us question. We have so many resources available, particularly at St John's, online, our podcast channels, our articles, for applicants to really get a feel for Chambers and have a think about whether it's a good fit for them. And so try to make that question and specifically their answer, I'd say, as personal as possible.
I agree, and I'm going to tag in, so this is still tip 3, but I think what you often see happen is people will, especially with an answer of why this Chambers, people will copy and paste what their answer is, and it's so transparent when that happens. So I think with every question, you need to actually answer the question and draft an answer to the question that you're being asked, and not just copying and paste it over from other Chambers, because it won't be the answer that is going to get your application to progress you to interview. So just really think about the question you're being asked and give an actual answer to that question, I think is an important tip to tag onto yours.
Definitely.
How does Chambers promote diversity?
Well, I suppose the headline really is we operate a fair recruitment policy at St John's where we have blind applications, and what that means in practice is that any sensitive data which may lead to unconscious bias is redacted, and applicants, when they're being marked in their applications, are given a number rather than their name. The other data that we remove are date of birth and any reference to school or universities attended. We would like to welcome our next guest, Alex Troop, KC. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you.
So Alex, thank you for joining us today. And I suppose what I wanted to ask you was, as someone who has marked applications and sits on the panels for pupillage interviews, what are your tips to applicants on how to do that well?
Yeah, well, I sort of see things in 4 stages. So, firstly, there's no getting away that we're interested in academic qualifications, and we see lots of people with good and excellent qualifications, and that's always a big plus, but it's not the be-all and end-all of their application, but it's an important part of it. We're interested in their commitment to the bar, so mini pupillages, work experience, mooting, public speaking of any kind, and also wider things like drama or performance is always interesting. We're then interested in why they've decided to choose a particular area of law that they are interested in. We offer specialist pupillages, so if someone says that they are particularly interested in one particular area of law, we're going to want to know why. And again, evidence-based answers is really helpful in that regard. And finally, I'm always interested to hear why people have chosen St John's in particular, why they want to practice from chambers in Bristol, why they want to practice from St John's as opposed to the other chambers within Bristol. All of those things are interesting to us, and will definitely be looked at closely as part of both the interview and the application.
And Alex, you are a member of Chambers who has gone from doing pupillage here to taking silk here. How has Chambers supported you throughout your career?
Chambers has been very supportive throughout my nearly 25 years here in Chambers, which is amazing because I still feel like a 21-year-old at heart. Right from the start, the clerks were extremely good at finding work of an appropriate level and putting me in contact with our instructing solicitors. We have lots of supportive instructing solicitors with a huge range of work. I started off obviously with junior work, but also did some senior work by being a junior to silk in Chambers. I found myself, in fact, in my early years as a junior to a silk in the House of Lords, wow. Which was remarkable for someone who was only 1 or 2 years cool at that stage. And then a combination of clerking and instructing solicitors has led to work not only within the Southwest, where we typically get lots of our work, but also nationally. So you end up working in London and Newcastle and Leeds and all over the place. So St John's is an excellent place, offers a huge amount of support to everyone, and you can go as far as you want to go.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Alex, and for those helpful insights.
Thank you both.
What's the format of the interview?
So moving to the interview process at St John's, the interviews are split into 2, and the first round of interviews is really competency. So, for example, can you tell us about a time that you've had to work well under pressure? And again, look at the pupillage policy on our website, and that sets out the things that Chambers are looking for. And in addition to that, there'll be a judgment. So I think in our year we had, I'll never forget it, the Uber judgment.
We did.
And so you want to be looking at that, summarising that, and essentially being able to argue the point both ways, prepare both ways, even if they say just prepare for one side, I think is a tip from me. So that's really the first round. And I think, how long was that? Maybe 15, 20 minutes?
It is, and that judgment is sent to you in advance. You don't need to worry about that. We will send it to you a number of days before the interview.
Yeah, I think it could have even been a week in advance.
Exactly.
So from memory, I think that was about 20 minutes, and that's the first round. And if you're successful in the first round, and the panel is general members of Chambers, if you go to the second round, that is specific to your practice area that you'll be going into. You're interviewed by people in your practice group, and mine, for example, because I obviously did family, was a non-molestation order and an occupation order. What was yours for your area?
Mine for the personal injury neg team was a relief from sanctions application, and it's probably a helpful time. I mean, it goes without saying, but what we offer pupillages in 3 areas. So you did, of course, the family, myself and personal injury and clinical negligence, and then we also have the commercial team as well. And I think from memory, our colleague, he had a injunction application for his advocacy exercise.
Yeah. So I think that takes up the majority of the second interview, and I think there are a few further questions, probably why do you want to come to St John's and all of those questions. And I think it's really important. Those questions you're going to get asked, why this Chambers, why this area of law, prepare those questions. It's an obvious thing to do, and it means that you're really confident in your answers when you're being asked those questions. So have those prepared in your mind.
The other tip in terms of preparation, which I would say, is make sure that your pupillage interview isn't the first interview you've done. If you can do a mock interview, I think that's a really great opportunity to practice some of your answers. And that could just be asking a friend to ask you a few questions. There are also a number of resources out there for prospective applicants, which I'd encourage everyone to utilise. If you aren't already a member of a Inns of Court, have a think about whether you want to join one of them, because they often offer mock application schemes, and really use all of the resources available to you. There is a website called Pupillage and How to Get It, again full of resources, full of mock interview questions, and sometimes they even run initiatives where you can sign up for mock interviews with them direct.
I remember I did a mock interview I'm with Middle Temple through my inn, so I think that's absolutely something that you have to sign up enough in advance they have time, but use that resource. I completely agree with that. I think it's helpful to have had some practice at doing the interview before you're in the hot seat for real. So
if you don't get an offer, what can you do?
I think the reality is a lot of people don't get pupillage the first year round, so I think it's really important not to be disheartened if you don't get an offer. I think it's a really useful time between, if you're going to apply again, and we would encourage you to apply again, to go away and look at your CV, look at what the gaps might be. Is it that you need to do another mini pupillage? Is it that you don't have much advocacy experience? So go and do a mooting competition, go and fill those gaps, and you'll come back a year later a stronger candidate, which is only going to put you in good stead. So we really encourage you not to be disheartened and make the application again.
What was your experience of first six?
So I had one supervisor, and I was predominantly with that supervisor, who's a senior member of Chambers, Zoe Saunders, and I shadowed her and I went around to the different courts with her. I was very lucky. We were obviously in the family court, but also the High Court. I was lucky enough to see her in the Court of Appeal, which is a really cool experience. And I also did then go with although she was my main supervisor, I did go with other members of Chambers in all areas, so in care, mat finance and private children. And what's really good about St John's is, though, in the month before you get on your feet, they encourage you, and as I did, to go around with much more junior members of Chambers, which is really helpful to see the sort of work that you're going to be doing when you get on your feet. And I remember finding that very reassuring, going from seeing Zoe's cases, which of course are X amount of years in, to seeing, okay, actually these are cases that the juniors are doing, and I can do that. So I think that's a really helpful month that you have prior to getting on your feet.
Definitely.
What was your experience of second six?
I think the answer to that is busy, busy but rewarding. I remember somebody saying to me before we started our second six that by the time you get there, you'll be feeling ready and excited to do the cases in your own name. And I wasn't sure when I heard that, but I think the reality is by the time you get there, you are just really looking forward to putting into practice what it is that you've been observing for the previous 6 months. Typically in second six, I was in court around 3 days a week, and the difficulty is balancing with that paperwork in your own name, but also perhaps paperwork for other members of Chambers, all of which with good communication, which I think really has been a theme of the podcast today, with the clerks and with your supervisors, you can get a clear system, but rewarding very much so. How was your experience?
I would echo everything that you've said. I think I was in court a similar amount, sometimes a little bit more, because family, we don't tend to have so much paperwork. But I think broadly very similar. I just wanted, do you remember the first day when we were both on our feet, day one of second six, and we were both in court at 10 o'clock, and we both called each other after and were like, we did it, we did the first case. And I think once you've got that under your belt, you're flying. So I think obviously there is nervous anticipation for the first case that you're really doing by yourself, but it is really exciting. So it's something to look forward to.
And I don't think anyone ever forgets their first brief. Even now, when we talk to the senior members of Chambers, they can all recall day one and where it was in the country that they were.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll never forget it.
How is pupillage funded?
Our pupillage award is £50,000, broken down into first six £25,000 and second six £25,000 guaranteed earnings.
What support is there for pupils?
So St John's are really conscious of supporting their pupils, and I think something that our Chambers does, which is really nice, is that every pupil is assigned a buddy who's a junior member of the team, and that person is there for them to go and talk about not just work, but if they have any concerns, if, I don't know, something was going on in their personal life that was making it difficult during their pupillage year. So that support is there, and that person isn't able to, they don't vote on you at the end when it comes to that. So they really are sort of a safe pair of hands that you can go and speak to about any of your concerns. So I think that's a really helpful support system that our chambers have put in place to try and support pupils in a year that is wonderful but can be tricky at times. So we kindly now have Ryan Morgan joining us, who is the head of the children team and is a supervisor in the family team. So welcome, Ryan.
Thank you very much for having me.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you for coming and speaking to us. The first thing we wanted to know is, why do you think that people should do their pupillage at St John's?
So, really good question. I know all chambers will say that it's about the quality of the work, but it really is about the quality of the work first and foremost here at St John's. We are really a London quality set in Bristol. And that's not just my view of things, that's what all the directories say and what all of the solicitors will say. So the quality of the work, but also you get to work in an incredibly supportive and collegiate set. And I really think that that's the case. I've been in other barrister chambers, and I was a solicitor first, so I've worked in law firms, and this is an incredibly supportive set. And you get to live and work in Bristol, which, as we all know, is the greatest city in the world. Maybe New York runs it close, but other than that, I can't think of anything else. And you get to live and work, as I say, in Bristol, but also the Southwest, which is beautiful.
And Ron, you have been a supervisor.
I have.
Can you help us understand how our supervisors support our pupils?
Sure. So I was our newest tenant, Chelsea, was my first pupil. So in terms of how it works here at St John's and supporting, firstly, it has to be a personal relationship. So you have to get to know what makes your pupil tick, what they want to achieve. It's all about making sure that they succeed and that their pupillage is a success. So supporting them through ensuring that their workload isn't too much, keeping an eye on what they're doing, making sure that there aren't any gaps in their legal education, but also just ensuring that they're happy with what they're doing at St John's and that they're getting to see other people within the team.
And how are our pupils assessed, Ryan? I know it's slightly different in different teams, but could you give a broad overview of how assessment works?
So it will be different in different teams, but in terms of family, which I think probably is broadly what other teams do as well, there might be some different bits and bobs. But in terms of assessment, firstly, it's you're always being assessed in pupillage, and it would be wrong to say anything other than that. But certainly at St John's, once you've got your offer of pupillage and you start, the whole point is trying to ensure that you're then taken on at the end. So it will be supportive, any assessment, and constructive. There are quarterly reviews, which are the big assessments. That doesn't just assess the pupil, but it will assess the supervisor as well. So there'll be bits, as you will both remember, where your supervisor isn't in the assessment and an independent person from the pupillage committee is chairing it. So you'll be asked to provide feedback on what your supervisor could do better or where there might be gaps. And then there'll be discussions about what further things need to be done, what targets for the next quarterly review you need to meet, those sorts of things. And also in terms of assessment, almost every day with Chelsea, what I would do is make sure we'd have a discussion in the car on the way back from court, talk about what she'd learned, what things I thought she had to take away. And also it's a whole team thing, so even though you'll have a named supervisor, everyone in the team will provide work and work opportunities for that pupil. So by the end of the pupillage, everyone in the team has a really good idea of what that person is all about, not just in terms of work, but also in terms of their personality and how they're going to fit into the team. So yeah, it's sort of an immersive experience, but there are formal bits of the assessment, but there are also lots of informal bits of the assessment as well.
And just to be clear, there isn't a sort of one formal assessment at the end, is there, which some chambers have?
Absolutely not. So there's no formal assessment at the end. The way that the voting and all of that sort of works, there'll be a recommendation from the pupil supervisor, and then that will go to a chambers vote and discussion within the team as well. And that's all pretty transparent, and pupils will know when there's a vote coming up, and typically they will also be told, if there are any issues, touch wood, there aren't really any issues with the pupils that we take on because of the calibre of people we get to apply. But yeah, no formal all singing or dancing assessment at the end. It's gradual as you go through.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much for joining us, Ryan. So everyone, we thought we would finish this section by doing a quick fire question round. Beatrice has got a card saying fact, and I've got a card saying myth. And Amy, who is in our marketing team, is going to ask us some questions for us to give quick answers to. So fire away, Amy.
Okay, start with, you can apply when doing the GDL.
Fact, you can.
You can apply when doing the bar course.
Another fact, you also can.
Does doing a mini pupil at St John's mean you'll get an offer of pupillage?
Myth. This is quick fire, isn't it? No, you don't have to have done a mini here, and it doesn't mean that you would get a mini if you had. Sorry, you would get pupillage if you'd done a mini at St John's.
You have to have a first class degree to get pupillage.
Me again, myth. Absolutely not. I think we ask for a 2-2 as a minimum. So of course, anything from a 2-2 up to a first.
You have to be Oxbridge.
Big myth. Back to me again. Absolutely not. I think a lot of people in our chambers did not go to Oxbridge. I went to Bristol. Beatrice went to Newcastle.
I did.
Each pupil has a different supervisor.
That's a fact.
Pupillage is only for law grads.
Very much a myth. I did classics, so you don't have to have done law.
Chambers does pro bono work too.
Yes, fact. Several of our members are on the pro bono recognition list.
And last one, do you have to live in Bristol to be a member of St John's?
No, definitely a myth. I don't live in Bristol, I live in Dorset. We think we have members of chambers who live as far up as the Isle of Skye and down in Cornwall, so you absolutely don't have to live in Bristol. As long as you've got a commitment and a link to the area, that's all we want. Well, that's all from Beatrice and myself, but before we leave, we've just got a few concluding comments from our Head of Chambers, Matthew White.
Hello, thank you for watching or listening, whichever way you've done it. Hope you're thinking about applying to St John's for pupillage. Remember, please, we are an off gateway set, so you need to apply using the form on the Chambers website. Deadline is the 6th of February of 2025, so please do get your application in time. What's the worst that can happen? What happened to me when I applied for pupillage here was I got a nice letter back saying, thanks for your application, we're not inviting you for an interview. Can't really get much worse than that. Don't be disheartened. There are pupillages out there. It'll all be all right in the end. If it's not all right, it's not the end.